today's show, we are going to be breaking down and taking a look at all 32 NFL teams, and we are going to be power ranking them, deciding where is your favorite team now after NFL free agency and prior to the draft. So, we've got some things that are going to move around, but we decided this is going to take more than just two brilliant, just incredible minds. We added a third. Yeah, I know. Sorry. We added a third here. Colton Dodgson. Welcome to the show, buddy. We are happy to have you. And like I said, you're the only one that's actually happy to be here because you're an Eagles fan. So you get to, talk good things about your team.
Yeah, seeing that one consensus right there, man, that number one, that feels good and brilliant and incredible. I don't know, you might be overselling it a little bit on my end. You guys are doing the heavy lifting there, but happy to be here nonetheless.
Yeah, you don't have to do that, man. You're already here. You don't have to keep saying this. Like it's cool.
It'll go away. All right, cool. Sounds good, man.
So I today is kind of just like a fun exercise. I was going through every single depth chart around the NFL, trying to find out which teams have the biggest glaring weaknesses they're going to get filled in the draft. And I think that just talks about why we have Philadelphia Eagles number one. I'm looking at the depth chart and I'm like, well, they don't really have a weak spot. They kind of have it all going. Sure, maybe they could start planning for the future by getting some young developmental guys they could put on the offensive line, or maybe, draft an edge guy that can kind of take over when some of these guys start getting up there in age. But as it stands right now, they're rolling back a lot of the same guys they had last year, best team in the NFL last year. They just really, you can make an argument that they're top three offense and defense right now. There just isn't a weak spot on that roster.
For sure.
This might be
No, go ahead. No, you go. Sorry, man.
I was going to say, this might be a really stupid comment by me, so let me know in the comments, guys, if this is stupid, but are we kind of wrong every year for just automatically crowning the Super Bowl champ as the number one team going into the next season? Because it almost never happens where we get the repeat. Are we just overlooking the other teams around them? So just to give the full context here, in tier one, at one, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles. At two, we've got the Baltimore Ravens. And at three, the Buffalo Bills. So Colton, I'm going to have you take your Eagles hat off for just a second. And I know that you can be as pragmatic about this as possible. Are we crowning the Eagles a little too much, or are these teams, the Ravens and Bills, a little bit closer than we think?
No, I think tier one, they're all pretty close, right? And you can make an argument for any of those three teams. I think the big thing with the Eagles right now, so close to free agency, is the loss of Josh Sweat, the loss of Milton Williams. They lose Darius Slay. You could go down the list. There are some guys that they're going to have to replace last year, but they've also mentioned that there's a plan for succession here with Moro Jomo and Keely Ringo and some other guys that they've been trying to develop. I think they're in a good spot to alleviate some of that with what they're losing. But I also think it's a testament to the fact that there really isn't a complete team in this tier, right? You can look at the Ravens and think, oh, hey, business as usual. They still have the conversation about when do they get out? When do they get over the hump, get to a Super Bowl, all those things. The Bills, I think the pass defense is still a question. So long story short, I just think the Eagles, Dave talked about completion. I think that's kind of what we're looking at here is this is the most complete team in the tier. It also helps that they just won a Super Bowl. So I think it's probably more so that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think you've got to put them at one. Sure, we could have come out here and gotten cute with it and said the Bengals are the best team, or the Chiefs are the best team, or whatever. But I think the reason they're the consensus best team right now is because they've had a handful of great seasons now. 3 straight years where they have been a very, very good team, and then they just went out. And the most recent memory we have of real NFL football is them just putting a beat down on the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So I think it's pretty obvious. I think if you polled 100 NFL teams and asked them who the best team in the NFL was, you'd probably get 95 people saying the Eagles.
I just want to confirm with you, Dave, there are not 100 NFL teams.
NFL fans. I'm sorry.
Okay.
NFL
yes.
Fans, yeah.
Yes. Them. I was, let's say this. Howie Roseman might be the best GM in the NFL, and I know I'm going to have 31 other teams worth of fans in the comments telling me I'm wrong. Not you, Tennessee Titans, sorry. But Howie Roseman, man, every year it just seems like not only is he getting the best players in the draft, but setting himself up so that there's always an understudy for every single position. We saw him do that at center recently with Jason Kelsey, and I wouldn't be surprised if we keep seeing him do that with all these other positions now with Darius Slay gone, and it's like every single year there's just the Georgia defensive lineman that falls to him, and this year there's a bunch more. So I wouldn't be shocked if something like that happens again. But yeah, Eagles, man, they round us out at number one. Ravens are at 2. Buffalo Bills at 3. We won't spend too much time here in the top tier. Let's get down to the next one. So at number 4, we've got the Detroit Lions. At 5, Kansas City Chiefs. 6, Cincinnati Bengals. 7, Green Bay Packers. 8, Washington Commanders. And at 9, the LA Rams. Dave, I see here that you are not a believer in the Green Bay Packers. Is this Bears bias? Because I have them at 6. Colton has them at 5. You hate them. You have them at 12. Is this a Jordan Love thing? Or is this a whole Packers team?
No, it's a Jordan Love thing. I've said it for years. Like, this guy just plays football like he's got a horseshoe hidden up his you-know-what. Like, he just chucks balls downfield and his receivers come down with them. And it's great. It's fun and it's exciting football, but I don't think it's sustainable. And now that Jordan Love contract is starting to kick in, which means that they can't allot money other places that they wish they could have, they were very much so a paper tiger last year. I mean, they looked good in the regular season, squeaking out close wins, and then didn't do anything in the playoffs. I don't think they're that good of a team. The defense is great, and I think people get so enamored by Jordan Love and what Josh Jacobs did last year, but the strength of this team is on their defense, and I wanted to move them a little bit higher because of how good the defense is, but this is still an offensive league first and foremost, and that's why some of the teams that I put ahead of the Packers, the Rams and the Buccaneers, are teams that I just think are so much better on offense that I'm just putting them ahead of the Packers.
Colton, tell Dave why he's wrong.
No, he makes a lot of great points, and this was one where I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to do that here, but
you don't get the show.
I know. It's my first time, man. I'm trying to pick up on this. No, but this was one where I was moving the Packers around quite a bit because of that Jordan Love conundrum. I love the defense and I love the sort of run the ball, control time of possession, and then play great defense, right? That blueprint. I mean, maybe I'm a little biased as the Eagles fan or whatever, but that blueprint can be successful. There's still obviously a glaring need at wide receiver, right? The Christian Watson injury, and then none of those dart throws in the middle rounds have sort of established themselves as like true number one targets. That's definitely, the passing game is still a question. Dave did say it. It's a passing league. I get it. Maybe I was just a little too enamored with the defense, but I'm sticking with it. I put them number 5. I think everybody around them, I have a lot of questions about the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Lions. I'm it's the coordinator thing, but I like the Packers because of their defense and because of that running game. And watching that playoff game against the Eagles, I outside of the Rams, I mean, obviously the Eagles blew out the Commanders and the Chiefs, but man, I didn't even think they were going to get out of that game with the Packers. The Packers defense kept them in it for so long, and I like that defense a lot.
So what stops us from putting a team like, let's say, the Commanders or the Rams, who they seem to kind of have it all together? I mean, I don't really know that there's much separating them from a team that we have like the Chiefs, who are up at 5, or the Bengals at 6. So what keeps them so low, Dave? Because I actually moved these rankings around a lot. And at one point I had the Commanders up at 6 ahead of the Packers and the Bengals, right there with the Chiefs. And I think you can make the argument that the Commanders overall as a team, especially after some of these moves where, yeah, I get it, he's not the same Deebo Samuel, but then adding Laramie Tunsil and some pieces on defense, the Commanders are still a really good team. So what stops us from putting them up there? Are we worried about the second year with Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty high on the Commanders. I've got them as 9th overall. So, I mean, we've all got them inside our top 10. I think the big fear for me, I mean, based on what we saw last year, you could argue they deserve to be in the top 5, but there hasn't been the sustained success. Like, we've seen the Bengals be good for a long time. We've seen the Rams be good for a long time. And this could be kind of a flash in the pan, which we see. And I think the reason that flash in the pan meter might be going off for me a little bit is just because we have seen Cliff Kingsbury do this pretty often, where, he goes somewhere, he has 1 year where he looks great, everybody gets enamored, they say Cliff Kingsbury finally figured it out, and then year 2 comes around and it doesn't look quite so great. So I think that's kind of the fear here. But really, yeah, it's just, we saw this with the Texans last year too, where CJ Stroud, looked like he was an MVP level quarterback, and then some of his not so great traits were highlighted in year 2. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Jaden Daniels, but when you start comparing teams and trying to rank them, that fear is kind of in the back of your head with a guy like Jaden Daniels, or when I'm looking at some of the teams ranked ahead of them, starting with the quarterback position, Matthew Stafford, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, the Lions, even with their brain drain there, I still have them ahead. So it's not that I'm, way down on the Commanders. I just need to see it for more than 1 year before I can push them way out.
The other team on this list that I had a question about here, Cincinnati Bengals. We've got them at 4, 5, 6. Now, Dave, you're highest on them. How could you have a team ranked at 5 that doesn't have a defense? Because honestly, I'm already looking at moving them down from 7. I'm so worried about this team's defense. I know they can add in the draft, and I'm sure there'll be some veterans that end up, being loose later in the offseason. But the whole Trey Hendrickson thing has me second guessing it. Like, I think it's very reasonable to have the Bengals down closer to like 9 or 10 out of this group.
I don't see it that way. Again, I said that I started with offense when I was doing this, and the same reason that I'm lower on the Packers is why I'm higher on the Bengals. It's an offensive-driven league, and you can make the argument that the Bengals now have the best offensive trio in the NFL secured up for the next
That
4+
they've already
years.
had.
Yeah, and T. Higgins has been hurt a lot of those years and dragging out those injuries longer than expected because he didn't have the contract he wants. Hopefully, he's got 120 million reasons to get out on the field now and play through those soft issue injuries those soft tissue injuries that benched him in years past. That's just, they're a good team, and they had a lot of one-score losses early in the season last year, but I'm not willing to write them off over a weird, early season blip when they were without their offensive coordinator and installing a new offense. I don't want to overreact to it yet. We know Joe Burrow is a top 5 quarterback. Jamar Chase is probably the best wide receiver in football. They've got the best wide receiver 2 in football. Of course, this is coming from a fantasy football brain here. The defense is terrible, but if you got to get into a shootout with the Bengals are likely to win that matchup.
Colton, thoughts on the Bengals here?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with Alfredo a little bit. I see, I don't mean to keep doing this, man, but I see it from both angles here, right?
You're welcome back anytime, buddy.
Yeah, you're the mediator here. So Alfredo and I don't
Well, that's what I'm
rip each other's
trying
heads
to
off
do.
today.
Yeah, I'm trying to like, I see validity on both. Isn't that what the mediator is supposed to do, right? See the
Exactly,
validity
yeah.
on both sides. Yeah.
Just fact check Alfredo when he gets out of line.
No,
I do
but
often.
Yeah, that offense, man, is a legitimate problem, and I think the continuity there. Big thing with the Bengals is those early season slumps. If they could just get out of the gate hot, I don't. Obviously, I think they're a playoff team last year. They have the talent of a playoff team. Defense it's two sides of the ball that are trending in opposite directions, right? We'll see what happens with Trey Hendrickson. They lose Sam Hubbard to retirement, all of those things. And at free agency, maybe their plan for the draft is heavily invest in defense. I mean, they're going to have to, right? You need cost-effective options.
This is a good draft to do that too.
Exactly.
There's a lot of good defensive linemen and edge rushers in this draft.
Yeah, but and I mean in such a pass-happy league to have the number one, I think Jamar Chase is the best receiver in the NFL, right? And I think you could not much of an argument that T. Higgins is probably a top. I keep thinking in fantasy terms, but a fringe top 12 wide receiver 1 guy, right? The run game wasn't. It was effective last year, right? With Chase Brown. We'll see how that trends this year. But I think offensively, this is a real solid team that can keep up with everybody. There's some work to do on defense. But like Alfredo said, this is a good draft to need to invest in defense. It's a unique challenge to have to overhaul one side of the ball with such a significant portion of your cap tied up in 3 guys at this point. We'll see how the numbers break out and everything like that. But I don't know. The offense is so special. I think that's if they get out of the gate early, they might even exceed this ranking. And that's been a huge ask for Zach Taylor teams is starting quick.
Last thing I want to look at here in this tier, and then we're going to move on. At number 9, we've got the Los Angeles Rams. Guys, with Devontae Adams being there over Cooper Kupp, and Colton, I'll throw this to you first. Are they back to being legit Super Bowl contenders now? Or like, because I know the whole thing was year after year, we were worrying the Rams are getting older, they're getting a little more decrepit, and it's not like Devontae Adams is young, but it does feel like there's a little bit more life injected into this offense right now, and Matt Stafford coming back and, running it back with the Rams. Are they still legitimate Super Bowl contenders, or do they just still not have enough on both sides of the ball?
I mean, they've won a Super Bowl with Stafford at their quarterback, right? And I think I'm still a fan of Devontae Adams. I think the metrics last year, people were maybe a little down on him because of the Jets effect. I actually think he looked pretty good last year, and I think he's
Oh,
going
Jets
to.
effect is great. I'm going to
Hmm.
keep that for
There you
every
go.
single show. Thank you.
Exactly. That's what I bring you, right? I didn't even plan on that, and you can have that for free. Uh, anyway, the Jets effect in uh, like everything that sort of happened with Aaron Rodgers and the weird Pat McAfee reveal, and it was just a weird time there. So I think getting Devonte Adams and slotting him behind Puka Nakua, having Devonte Adams as your second option in that offense is such a luxury. And I think there's still some gas in the tank with Adams, and that gives them another legitimate option in a passing attack that's already one of the best in the NFL. So I don't know if it's an upgrade from Cooper Kupp, but I don't think there's going to be much of a fall off. I like Adams a lot. And to answer your question, in terms of a Super Bowl contender, anytime you have that McVay Stafford, I almost watched them beat the Eagles this year in a blizzard, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you can ever. They're a Jalen Carter sack away from probably being in the NFC Championship game, so I don't think you can ever write off that duo. I think they're in good shape.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, this team's just a few years away from winning a Super Bowl. And last year, everybody was talking early in the season, much like the Bengals. They got off to a slow start. Everyone was saying, this is the end for the Rams. And then what did they do? They played games well when it mattered most. They won 5 straight games to close out the regular season to secure a playoff spot. And then they went out and they just beat down the Minnesota Vikings. And then they lost a 1-score game to the eventual Super Bowl champ. So, I think Adams is a huge upgrade from Cooper Kupp. No disrespect to Cooper Kupp. I mean, what he did a few years ago was great, but I think that Devontae Adams, that the age cliff is looming. It's going to come here soon, but right now, like what we've seen last year and the year before, I think he's still a top 5 wide receiver in the league. I mean, he is still just so aggressive at the catch point. He's still got the juice after the catch, still the crispest route runner out there. So I think this is a huge upgrade. And I think what we're going to see, I was on with Bob Harris earlier today, and we were kind of talking about this situation a little bit. I think that you're going to see Puka Nakua maybe not be quite as involved, but I think the passing volume overall just grows so much that even if like the per route run metrics and the target share dip a little bit, the efficiency is going to go up, the overall pass volume is going to go up. I think we're going to see the Rams go back to that team a few years ago where they were a pass first offense, just hanging 40 points almost every single week. I think that's what we're going to see now with Puka Nakua and Devontae Adams there.
I mean, they kind of have to. They kind of have to a certain extent. I know the defense was good last year with the rookies, Jared Verse and Braden
Jared
Fisk
Verse,
on there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but we have to expect that these guys are going to improve, that they can run it back. If that defense doesn't continue to get better, the secondary really struggles. And that's really the toughest thing there. All right, guys, next tier on here, we're going to number 10. This is tier 3. At 10, we've got the Los Angeles Chargers. At 11, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 12, Houston Texans. 13, Dallas Cowboys. 14, Minnesota Vikings. 15, Denver Broncos. 16, San Francisco 49ers. And at 17, Chicago Bears. Dave, you have some explaining to do.
Do I?
Because you had the Los Angeles Chargers as your number 7 overall team. And I need to hear this because I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. They've improved the offensive line with Mekhi Becton. They add Najee Harris in the running game, so it'll be more consistent. We love old man coaches because they play old man football and it's proven to win. And then they add some more players on defense, but they're still not quite there, in my opinion. I have them at 12. Colton has them at 11. So did I take enough wind out of your sails, or do you still have something more?
I mean, you did mention a lot of things. They were already one of the best offensive lines in football last year, and then adding Mekhi Becton to that, adding a much better running back in Najee Harris than anything that they had last year. I think that helps the offense. But then you look on defense, too. I mean, this defense is still just loaded up with playmakers. They went in and they brought in Dante Jackson. They re-signed Khalil Mack. Derwin James is still there, finally, with a clean bill of health going into this season, which I can't remember the last time he's had. I mean, they're just a very complete football team, and I think that last year the overall record was disappointing, but that was year one with a new head coach and a new offensive coordinator. That was a lot for Justin Herbert to have to take on as a young quarterback. Now I think with some of that cohesion and continuity going into year 2, I think we could see the offense start to spread its wings a little bit like we did over the second half of the season last year. I just look at the Chargers on paper, and I know this is always the Chargers, right? They always look great on paper in the offseason. But I think that now they actually have the coaching in Harbaugh and Greg Roman to take that on team paper and actually translate to success. So yeah, I had them as my 7th overall team and ahead of quite a few of the ones that we talked about in the last year. I've got them ahead of the Green Bay Packers, the Washington Commanders, and the Los Angeles Rams.
I'll say this: that defensive line is still really, really bad. Like really bad. But the NFL draft is coming up, and there are a lot of pass rushers there. But then my question is also this, and this is going to go to you, Colton, because the Chargers are always being connected to a guy like Colston Loveland, tight end coming out of Michigan. Is that the kind of thing that is going to unlock Justin Herbert? Because last year and really going into this year, that's still all he has is Lad McConkey there. I mean, Quentin Johnston really just hasn't turned into the guy that many people thought. Mike Williams comes back. That's great, but he kind of seems like he's a shell of his former self. He tried to make it on 2 different teams.
Probably better than Quentin Johnston, if we're being honest.
I mean, probably, but that's kind of, anybody.
A lot of the same things.
Yeah. So, Colton, where do you think the Chargers end up going? I know we're kind of veering off a little bit into draft territory, but do you think they end up going with an offensive playmaker like Colston Loveland and giving Justin Herbert a few more toys to play with?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think Justin Herbert, watching him play, he's one of my most talented, arm talent wise, one of the most talented quarterbacks I have seen in the NFL, right? He does some things on a game-to-game basis that just like makes your jaw drop, right? He's so talented, but it feels like he hasn't necessarily had the skill players around him to unlock that talent and ultimately unlock the passing game here, right? And so I think we saw flashes from somebody like Will Dissly in this offense last year. There were moments where Dissly was effective as a target in this passing game, and Colston Loveland would be a huge step up from that, right? With Lad McConkey was awesome in the slot. It would make sense. I don't know. You talked a lot about the defense. I think the defense is in good shape. Maybe address the trenches a little bit on that side of the ball. But if you're trying to unlock that passing game, right, and they threw at the 10th highest rate last year. So if you're trying to unlock that passing game, it would only make sense to give Herbert a big target who could fill a role that might lead to quite a bit of production in that passing game.
I think something else worth mentioning, Alfredo, we talked about this a lot last year with in regards to Lamar Jackson and the Todd Monken offense and having to kind of learn a new offense. So often we look at the new coaching hire, the new offensive coordinator, and we say, well, everything is fixed now. They've got a good coach, but it's usually year 2 that we actually really start to see that. So when I see a new coaching staff come in, I like to see what the player did in the second half of the year. And that's where we saw Lamar Jackson in the second half of 2023 was absolutely lighting it up out there. And I said, this guy was pacing for 4,000 yards and 1,000 rushing yards. And if you look at Justin Herbert, the first half of last year, they were keeping him on a short leash. He was coming back from that ankle injury as well, but he averaged 210 yards over the first half of the season and then 248 yards over the second half of the season. So if we just double what he did over the second half of the season, his 17-game pace, 4,200 yards, 26 touchdowns. I mean, that's the Justin Herbert we're used to seeing, not the guy who is playing on a bum ankle learning a new offense early in the season.
I am so glad you brought up coaches in their second season, because that leads us to the Houston Texans.
Yep.
Where DeMeco Ryans, his second year, not so great. No. Not nearly as good as the first one, but the lucky thing for them is that they are in a really bad division where they could still be competing for a playoff spot every single year. And this is where we had a little bit of dissension here. So I had the Texans at 10. Colton, you're at 12. Dave, you're at 15. You're lowest in the Texans. Now, I think the Texans have some very obvious holes in the offensive line, especially after trading away Laramie Tunsil. But this is, once again, a draft that has a lot of good offensive linemen, a lot of good defensive linemen in there. That can easily be taken care of. What I still look at is that this defense is really, really improved. And I still think I believe in CJ Stroud. I think he can continue to take that next step, especially with a full season of having a healthy Nico Collins. You put Christian Kirk on this team to go in and do what Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs were doing. And who knows, team might still actually go out and just draft another weapon to have out there on the field with them. So, Dave, I want to hear a little bit. Why do you have the Texans a little bit lower? It's not crazy low. It's at 15. But what's the concern for them going into this year?
Yeah, I still have faith in CJ Stroud too, but we have to change faith. I think the faith in CJ Stroud last offseason was people saying this guy's going to be a top 3, top 5 guy. Now it's like, I think the faith is, he can be, um, a top 15, like better than most starting quarterbacks, I think is what we've kind of maybe reframed how we feel about CJ Stroud. And I think you're absolutely right. This defense is so good, and that is the strength right now. But you look, I mean, outside of Nico Collins, Christian Kirk could step in as the wide receiver 2 here, but I do have some concerns about the pass catchers where they're still relying on Dalton Schultz a lot more than I'd like to. Joe Mixon is dangerously close to that age cliff. Might have actually seen him fall off of it last year. Still, we'll see how that works out. There's just a lot of holes on this team, and they could look a lot better out of the draft, but they still, the interior defensive line isn't great. They've got some good edge rushers there, and they get some good
They
pressure up
improved.
the middle from the linebackers.
I will say they improved that interior offensive line. Did you
Who did
say
they bring
offensive
in?
line or defensive line? They bring in
Defensive
Laken
line.
Tomlinson. Oh, defensive line?
I
Yeah,
said
never mind.
interior defensive line is their weakness. Yeah. And their
Oh,
offensive
yeah.
line, they can only improve it. I mean, they got rid of the best guy there, which kind of weird. I don't know if you heard that story. They said Laramie Tunsil, it was kind of a leadership issue more than anything else. They said they
It
got rid of him because they needed a culture change.
wouldn't be surprising. I mean, I haven't read that, but I mean, it wouldn't be surprising. Like I guess there's a reason that he wasn't fitting in Miami when he was there. I don't know enough about the player to comment on that, but I will say, like, I do love what the Texans did, bringing in some very good interior offensive linemen to help CJ Stroud alleviate some of that pass rush that he was getting throughout the year that was really bothering him. And these are faster guys too that can get out to the edge and actually do some of this zone run blocking that we need to see for Joe Mixon. So I still kind of like them a bit. Colton, honestly, you're right in between us. So I think we don't need to expand too much here on the Texans, but I do want to stay in the same state, and I want to go to the next team on our list, the Dallas Cowboys, who we're all pretty close. I'm at 14, Colton at 13, Dave at 11. Colton, talk to me about the Dallas Cowboys, because they've been in the news a lot, whether it's the fact that they desperately need a running back and they go out and sign 2 aging veterans that are not great, or the fact that one of their former defensive linemen, longtime star DeMarcus Lawrence, basically says, yeah, I know I'm never going to be able to win a championship there. So what's up with the Cowboys? Are they just kind of going to be middle of the road over and over and over and over?
Yeah, it's so tough to gauge this team. They make they've actually signed quite a few players in free agency. They just haven't really been those splash moves or anything like that. And you talked about the running game and bringing in the guys they brought in, right? Miles Sanders, former Eagle, right? Great. But Miles Sanders is yeah, he's an aging veteran, like you said, and then Javonte Williams. I don't know if maybe the knee injury had something to do with it, but just hasn't really been the same guy.
He's like 23, but his knees are 33.
Exactly. And you look at a guy like Rico Dowdle at the end of last season, I actually thought showed flashes, right? I felt like these 2 guys were maybe a bit of a downgrade from Rico Dowdle, and now Rico Dowdle's in Carolina. But I think the running game is going to take a step back. Dak Prescott has shown he can shoulder the offensive load and carry this team through the passing game, right? There's not too many options outside of CeeDee Lamb left. Jake Ferguson is still there, all of that. But you'll get some guys back on the defensive side from injury. But there's just so much drama, right? The Micah Parsons issue with his contract and all of that. Sorry, my dog's going crazy. I don't know if you can hear that, but anyway, the defensive side of the ball, all of that, DeMarcus Lawrence saying what he said. There's just always going to be drama surrounding the Cowboys. It doesn't seem like this is a super complete team. And are they going to be able to outrun all of the talk and all of that stuff with their play on the field? It's going to have to run through Dak Prescott.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like, there still are some glaring holes that this team needs to fill. But the reason I was a little bit higher on them than I think a lot of other people were, because it just comes down to Dak Prescott. I mean, this is a guy over the last 6 years. You look at what he's done on a per game basis. He's averaging nearly 280 passing yards per game. Like, he's just a very good quarterback. And I think that having one of those quarterbacks just automatically pushes you up in the power rankings. It's a quarterback driven offensive sort of league. And that's why I'm still holding on to a little bit of faith from the Cowboys. It seems like every year, Dak Prescott's hurt by the end of the year, and we're seeing Ben DiNucci or Cooper Rush or Andy Dalton or whoever go out there and finish the year for him. But I still think that quarterback is much better than the public perception believes he is.
Oh yeah, 100%. Dak's actually a lot better than most people consider him to be. I'm just still worried that Jerry's kind of just the guy, and his son Stephen Jones. Like, I feel like they just kind of look at names, and they're like, that guy was good. That guy was a first round pick. Let's bring him on here.
Al Sanders, he had a big game against us a few years ago.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it feels very much like one of my buddies playing Madden or something. They're like, "Yeah, you remember that guy? He was really good like 3 years ago." I don't know why I kind of turned my friend into the Penguin, but no. Guys, Minnesota Vikings are on here. Next team. And this is an interesting one because we talked about this before the show, that we just kept moving this team up and down and all over because on paper, this roster is really good. Improvements across, like, very, very big improvements on the offensive line. Sign Ryan Kelly, sign Will Freeze. Both, he just basically stole the interior offensive line from Indy. And then for the defensive line, they had Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. They bring in Isaiah Rodgers at the corner spot. Colton, which is, an Eagle.
Another loss.
Yeah, you know what? I'm looking at this team, and it just seems like, damn, they could actually be NFC contenders. The question mark here is going to be JJ McCarthy, Dave. And that's the guy that still worries me the most. He's got very few reps coming out of college. I know he's been in the Harbaugh system, and Kevin O'Connell can make, chicken salad out of chicken, what. But I don't know. Like, I'm still worried. I don't know if this team is ready to compete with a young quarterback with so few starts.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just at the point where I'm just willing to trust anything Kevin O'Connell does until he gives me a reason not to. Like, rehashing, and this is going to happen all offseason on this show and every other football and NFL show out there. People are going to rehash the same talking points they did last year. Like, can Sam Darnold, can he flourish under Kevin O'Connell? Is Justin Jefferson going to be able to get it done? And rather than playing into that game again, I'm just going to kind of blindly trust Kevin O'Connell because he's given us a lot of reason to. We've seen Josh Dobbs play well under him. We've seen Nick Mullins play under him. We saw him resuscitate Sam Darnold. So if he's got faith in JJ McCarthy, I've got faith in JJ McCarthy. That's pretty much all it comes down to.
Gotta have faith. All right, next on here. Broncos, where I think we're all just kind of seeing that they are still going to remain in the middle of the pack. They've made some improvements. You've got Bo Nix there. Evan Ingram is going to be a nice piece for fantasy football. I'm really curious to see how they're going to utilize him. But the team I want to talk about here at 16 is the San Francisco 49ers, because this is a sharp fall from grace. And Colton, you actually have them ranked the lowest at 18. I have them at 16. Dave has them at 14. I think there's still plenty to like about the Niners, but they are the team that is just sort of teetering on the brink, that if one or two injuries break the other way for them, their season and potentially their franchise is cooked for quite a while, and they kind of have to press that reset button. So, Colton, why do you have the Niners here at 18?
There's just so much uncertainty, whether it's age, whether it's guys, coming back from injury, or all of those things, right? With Brandon Ayuk, who played such a crucial role in the offense during their Super Bowl run, right? And lost him for the entire season last year. The Brock Purdy window now, having to pay Purdy, what's going to happen there? All of those things. There's Trent Williams being as old as he is, Christian McCaffrey, like the list just goes on. There's always something. They just lost Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga to the Broncos, right? So there's pieces of the defense that are moving on, and they cut former Eagle, and I'm completely blanking. I don't know how, but the guy they signed from Philly, who they just cut, he was hurt last year. Hargrave. There we go. I was like,
Yeah.
I know his name.
Yeah.
It's on the Hargrave. There we go. So there's a lot of variables here, and it would take a lot for every single one of them to bounce their way. That's just kind of how it feels. What is Ayuk? How long does it take Ayuk to get back up to speed? George Kittle was healthy last year, but we've seen him deal with injuries throughout the course of his career. Alfredo, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you were talking about, there's just so much with this team, and if one or two things goes wrong, this franchise is set back, and we're coming up to maybe the window's already shut, but best case scenario, it feels like the window is like barely cracked. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Niners, and I think the Rams have become the class of that division. I even think the Cardinals might be able to even make some noise if their signings go the way that they hope they will. Jonathan Gannon seems to be somebody. Eagles fans aren't the biggest fans of him, but he seems to be somebody that the players enjoy playing for. It seems like they've got their coach. Is Kyler Murray their guy? I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but just looking at the division, I don't know if the Niners are still the definitive, or by the end of the year, they might not even be the definitive number 2 team in that division. So just a lot that has to go right and a lot that can go wrong. And that's kind of where I was.
Yeah, I think their window closed last year. I mean, it seemed like last year was kind of the last, like, hey, let's run it back and hope we can do this again. And it didn't really work out that way. But I'm not willing to put them in the bottom half of NFL teams yet. I think that they still have a lot of good pieces there. I've been a Brock Purdy believer for a long time, and I know a lot of other people aren't, but I think they've done a great job of setting up 2 very important positions, their wide receiver and their quarterback room. As they were both aging a couple of years ago, they kind of set themselves up now. So, I mean, they're going to be without Deebo Samuel, and they're going to be without Brandon Ayuk to start the season, most likely. But I think that Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings, you can get pretty similar production from those 2 guys. And then they lost Javarius Ward, but, they've got Renardo Green ready to step up, who's been a really promising player as well. You talked about Trent Williams getting up there in age. I think that's probably the biggest thing that's taken a hit over the last couple of years is their offensive line. They've lost a lot of really big guys in free agency. Trent Williams is still kind of the guy holding it down, but I think he's, I want to say 38 years old this year. I mean,
he might be 106, dude. I don't know. It feels like Trent Williams has been playing forever.
Up there. Yeah, but they've still got, one of the best linebacking cores in the NFL. They've got a great duo of cornerbacks as well. Their championship window is definitely closed, and I agree with you, Colton, that I think the Rams are now the best team in the NFC West. But I still think the 49ers are better than most NFL teams.
I think I'm gonna do it. I think I'm gonna say this here on air. No, never mind. The Seahawks still exist. I think the San Francisco 49ers will be 3rd in the NFC West.
It's possible. I honestly, I don't think the Seahawks are that bad. We'll talk about them in a little bit.
Okay.
I don't think they're as
All
bad
right.
as everyone's making them out to be.
That's our cue to move on to the next thing. Hey, Dave, congrats. The Bears are number 17. They look good. There's not a lot of holes, not a lot of draft needs. Maybe they get Ashton Jincy. Yeah.
I tried to push them to 16, Dave. I'm sorry. Thought I did enough.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
I was hoping I'd be like significantly lower than the rest of you guys. I might have gotten a little overexcited here. I mean, I've got them at 17 too. I think that feels about right. Of course,
it's the most Bears place to have them, right in the middle.
Yeah, I know. Like, everyone knows the upside. Ben Johnson can come in here and inject this, but we also, like we talked about earlier on the show, year 1 offensive coordinators, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. And I think people expect this team to just come out week 1 and just start lighting it up. When the reality is, it might be a bumpy first season here. We also, Matt Patanti talks about this when he talks about offensive line. One of the biggest things that he weighs in his offensive line grades are cohesion. And right now, yeah, you look on paper, this is a very good offensive line. But these guys have never taken a snap of football together. I mean, they might literally go in with 4 new offensive linemen next year that have never played together. So I think Bears fans, talking to myself here, be prepared for a bumpy start. Like, don't be shocked if this team comes out 1-3 or 2-6 to start the year. It's not going to be an immediate fix. There's still a long road to make this a good football team.
All right, let's go to tier number 4. At 18, we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers. They don't have a starting quarterback, but we have them at 18. At 19,
can I just
Raiders,
hypothetically, because I did weigh
sure,
like teams that don't have a quarterback yet. If this team goes out and signs Aaron Rodgers, are we moving them like inside the top 15? Or if they maybe Jameis Winston?
No, because
I think quarterback, but with those wide receivers, Jameis Winston could be a fun quarterback in Pittsburgh.
I think this team, I kind of rank them as if they are going to have one of the quarterbacks that has been, aforementioned here.
So they can't really go higher than 18 for you?
Maybe, like, but I don't know that there's a big difference for me between Rodgers, Russ. I'm not putting Jameis in there because I don't think he makes them a winning team.
He's his own thing. Yeah.
He's just great for fantasy. He's awesome for fantasy. But like Rodgers and Russ, I don't know that it moves the needle for me. Like, I think this is where they would be if they just had a genuine starting quarterback. I think the Steelers could honestly just run it back with anybody. They could put Gardner Minshew there, and I think they're still at 18. Like, it just doesn't really matter for me because the Steelers have so much insulation around whoever the quarterback is. I think it would just have to be that Aaron Rodgers goes in there and doesn't implode. And I don't know if that's possible anymore. That's why, like, I actually think the best thing for the Steelers, run it back with Russ. He knows the team. He knows the offense. You guys are comfortable with him. You're bringing in DK Metcalf, a guy that he played with for years and had success with for years. If there's anyone that's going to be able to play well with him, just bring back Russ. Don't make it a whole dog and pony show with Aaron Rodgers. The fact that he's been waiting this long to decide, make Rodgers stay in New York, honestly. Make him stay in New York, go back to the Giants. I think that'd be just absolutely the funniest thing.
Funnier than the Vikings.
Oh,
no, Rodgers and the Vikings would be hilarious.
That would be the best thing that has ever happened to football, for Aaron Rodgers to absolutely just follow in the exact same steps as Brett Favre. Oh, it'd be delicious. All right, moving on here. 19, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders. At 20, Atlanta Falcons. At 21, and you damn well believe we are going to talk about this.
Yeah, you're really propping that rating up, Alfredo.
And you're bringing it down, you. Number 22, the Carolina Panthers. 23, the New York Jets. And at 24, the Arizona Cardinals. So, guys, at 19, we've got the Vegas Raiders. I've got them outside of my top 20. I know they added Geno Smith. It's, I guess, a slight increase. I have to assume here, Dave, you have them at 18 because you love old coaches and you think that they do just enough to get 7 wins.
I mean, they're aiming for middle of the pack. That's exactly what they're doing. Bringing back Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly and Geno Smith. This isn't a team with Super Bowl aspirations. This is a team that is just sick of getting embarrassed, and they're hoping to not get embarrassed this year.
I think that AFC West is going to just pummel them.
I know.
Denver, Kansas City, Los Angeles. I think they're just going to get pummeled there, and we're going to watch Geno kind of go out with his career with a whimper after all that fun stuff he's done in Seattle. At 20. Atlanta Falcons, 21. This is where we need to talk about it. Colton, you're going to be the mediator.
Yeah.
Because
I'm occupying that middle ground here for sure.
Please, dear God, for the love of God. At 19, or excuse me, I have the Miami Dolphins at 19. We have them ranked 21 overall. Dave, you've got them at 25. And not only do you have them ranked 25 as the 7th worst team in the NFL, but you have them below the New York Jets and the New England Patriots. And I can't help but ask, are you doing this just to troll me?
I think the Jets have a very good roster, and I was a little bit higher on them just because of the excitement of what Justin Fields could do with a good supporting cast. I think is fun. And then Drake May. I mean, if I'm starting these rankings with quarterback and offense, I would much rather build a team around Drake May than I would around Tua. I don't know how you feel,
That's
Alfredo,
not the
but
that's not
I think
the
coaching
exercise.
staff in New England is better.
It's not...
I'd take Mike Vrabel over Mike McDaniels. I can go through position by position, and I think the Patriots beat the Dolphins in a lot of spots.
Oh God, Colton. You know what? I do want to say my piece before anything else.
Yeah, no,
if you
all
trade
you.
Tua and Mike McDaniel right now for Drake May and Mike Vrabel, would you do it? I'd say coach and quarterback are pretty important.
Sure. Okay. Not strong enough there. I mean, the Patriots still have 1,000,001 holes. Drake May is still not throwing that ball to anyone on the offense. The offensive line is still really bad. The defense has added pieces, but not pieces that are game changers. The Jets just have year after year after year of being totally incompetent. Still with that offensive line, after how many draft picks they've put into it, they still don't have a quarterback. I know Justin Fields is there. I get it. But
I hear a lot of anti-Pats and anti-Jets talk. But
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Oh no, okay. One, when Tua has been healthy, he's absolutely a winning quarterback. We can't deny that, Dave. When Tua is healthy, he is a winning quarterback. Is that Colton? Colton, I'm going to you, Colton.
No, I mean I like the duo of McDaniel and Tua has looked for that offense has looked effective when Tua is on the field, and I think a lot of the downside last year was when, Tua was hurt and there was all of that quarterback inconsistency. I get it. I like the Dolphins offense a lot too. I mean, Tyreek Hill, there's all the drama surrounding him. He's getting up there in age. I think Achane is awesome. Can Waddle put it together, stay healthy, stay on the field, all of those things. Jonnu Smith kind of came on for them too. There's nice pieces there. It's just, again, a team with a lot of variables, a team with a lot of outcomes. And I'm glad I'm in the middle here. I'm glad that I keep saying it, and I'm not just saying it, but there's truly validity on both sides here. But The Drake May, Vrabel, or McDaniel Tua thing. I think I'm taking Drake May and Vrabel myself, but I'm very much in the middle on them. I could see some different outcomes here. Great for fantasy though. I like them a lot as a fantasy team.
And by definition, you are right, Alfredo. I'm sorry. In his starts last year, Tua Tagovailoa was 6-5. He's a winning quarterback.
Okay. You mean after 2 concussions? If we're talking about who is most likely to be injured and not be in the league in 2 years, yeah, absolutely. And when the way you're phrasing it with having Drake May and Vrabel for the foreseeable future, absolutely. But this is power rankings for right now. You respect the game, Dave, or you don't play it at all, young man.
All right. The last thing I'll say, and this is
Tua Tagovailoa, 38 and 24 as a starter.
Yeah, and I just feel like that shine from the McDaniel Tua connection, like it was electric that first year they were together, and I feel like it just slowly started to fade off, and a lot of that could be with Tyreek Hill losing a step, not being the player he was. But you hear these rumblings about the Dolphins just being a soft team, that they're all speed and no muscle, and that worries me in the NFL because they start to show that sometimes. And I'm gonna remain a little bit lower on the Dolphins. I'm sorry, Alfredo.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. Going to our next team. We're not going to talk about the Jets, by the way. 22, Carolina Panthers. This is going to be interesting.
We're all in agreement on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, across the board. But Carolina Panthers, everything's just going to hinge on Bryce Young. It has to hinge on Bryce Young being a good quarterback. And I think unless the Carolina Panthers go out and draft a Tet McMillan at 8 or get themselves a few big-time weapons in the NFL draft, it's going to be really hard to keep seeing him improve. I mean, we have to hope for not only development from Bryce Young, but development from other guys on this team, like Xavier Legette, who didn't quite show us his best stuff as a rookie. Jalen Coker's going to be in there. Adam Thielen, who's like 68 years old. I'm a little worried that they're not going to have enough weapons for Bryce Young to keep developing. But the offensive line looks good. The running game is strong. The defense is improving. Colton, can the Carolina Panthers actually compete for a potential playoff spot?
Definitely. I think this division helps them out a ton. And there's so much, you kind of said it already, but with Bryce Young, and we see it so often, the development plan in the NFL, when you go out and you get a quarterback, you have to have a plan for developing them, right? And it got off to a weird start with Bryce Young, especially in year 2. He gets benched, and then Andy Dalton takes over, and he comes back, plays really well toward the end of the year. That pairing with Dave Canales seems to make sense. I think the draft is going to be very impactful for them. If you're able to go out and you're able to get a true number 1 for Bryce Young, I think he's shown us that you're going to see that development continue to progress, right? And if it does, there's enough pieces on this team that they could be, one of those in the bubble teams until on the bubble. I mean, week 16, week 17, that sort of thing, and maybe even in contention for the division, because there isn't one. I think the Bucks are probably the peak of this division right now, but the Panthers showed enough last year that they could definitely be considered a team that can push the Bucks, put some pressure on the Bucks, and contend for a wild card if Bryce Young takes that step. It looks like the coach, and even bringing back Andy Dalton, I think that's big too, right? Andy Dalton comes back and he's there to sort of help mentor Young as well. I think he's in a good spot, which is weird to say, given how last year started with Bryce Young.
Yeah, and I think Bryce Young answered the questions last year. I mean, he looked really, really good over the second half of the season, and not just looking good like consistently, but also getting better almost every single week. Like he just continued to improve week over week after he came back from his benching. So I've got a lot of faith in the Panthers, and I think their ceiling is really high. But it does come down to addressing that wide receiver spot, maybe a tight end spot as well. I mean, they do have kind of a penchant for these really sparked up athletic guys, whether it was Jonathan Mingo or Xavier Legette or Jatavian Sanders, Tommy Tremble. They always seem to like these really, really athletic guys. And there are a lot of those really athletic guys, especially at the tight end position, coming into this draft. Now, they've got a late pick in round 2 that they got from the Rams. They don't have their pick at the top of round 2, but they've got the 8th overall pick, which they could potentially use on Tet McMillan. That's who I expect them to draft there. But if they don't do that in round 2, they could easily get themselves a Mason Taylor or Terrence Ferguson, one of these tight ends that could help with his development as well. So really, I mean, my ranking for the Panthers is me banking on them doing the right thing in the draft and getting a long-term pass catcher. I also think if they draft Tet McMillan, it makes a lot of sense because then you can move Legette into the slot where he's going to be a much better player. You know, he's not a guy who should be playing out wide the way he was last year. So my ranking here is on hoping that the Panthers do the right thing. But, man, if they botch this pick somehow and they go into the 2025 season with Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette, and Tommy Tremble, I'd probably move them down a bit from where I have them.
The problem with the Panthers, you mentioned Xavier Legette would be good in the slot. Jalen Coker is also good in the slot. Adam Thielen is also good in the slot. And then I was sitting here thinking, because I'm doing my mock draft for Football Guys, go check it out, footballguys.com. I'm sure it'll be out soon by the time you're actually watching this. Tyler Warren, tight end for Penn State, would be another fun guy to have there.
Mm-hmm.
But he's going to have to do most of his work out of the slot and be another athletic guy that you have to try to make it work. And so I almost wonder, like, I get a little worried that they've maybe boxed themselves in this corner where they need to go and get a Tet McMillan type or the guy we had been talking about, T. Higgins. And it's like they need to have that prototypical wide receiver one. If not,
way too much sense. They've just got to draft Tet there at 8.
You're sitting there at 8. You've got the offensive line for your quarterback. Just give him the weapon that he needs. That's we can just leave it at that. The last team in this tier at number 24, the Arizona Cardinals. And Colton, this is where we're going to need you to be the voice of reason, because you would have thought that Dave and I disagreed most on the Miami Dolphins, but no, we have 8 spots of difference between us. I have the Cardinals at number 20. Dave, you've got the Cardinals at 28. You believe that the Cardinals are actually one of the worst teams in the NFL. Colton, you're right in the middle of us. So
I didn't
Dave,
do that on purpose. I just need to let you guys know that. I let the record show. Let the record show that I did rank before Alfredo. So I was not just going through finding the middle ground between each of these picks. I just need to make that clear.
And let the record show I put my rankings in here as a thought leader, first and foremost, and haven't looked at these rankings until we started recording the show. So this is all news to me.
Guys, there's no record. Stop asking for the record to show something. Dave, say bad things about the Arizona Cardinals.
I've been holding the torch for Kyler Murray for a long, long time, and I'm ready to douse it with water. I just don't think he's the guy.
Do you just think he's a bad quarterback?
I think he's a bad quarterback. Exciting highlights, like the 2-point conversion he had a few years ago. My goodness, that was one of the best highlights we've seen in the last decade. He does some really fun and exciting things, but there's just too many weak points in his game. The inconsistencies. I mean, he had one game last year where he looked like the best quarterback in football, and then you look at what he did over the rest of the season, and he just can't string together good games. I don't know what the issue is. I don't know if it's his size. I don't know if it's his work ethic, if he just doesn't have between the ears. I don't know what the issue is, but they're at the point now where they have committed a long-term, very expensive contract to Kyler Murray. And if you've got that sort of money tied up in a quarterback where you can't address other positions of need, they're just kind of going to float in this purgatory right now. And maybe, I'm not saying that I think they're going to finish 28th this team, but I think that, or 28th this season in overall standings. But the reality is they're probably not going to finish in the top half, and they don't really have any sort of ceiling outcome here. So I just looked at them as kind of one of the bottom dwellers in the NFL. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of hope for Arizona fans right now.
Okay, things first. We need to redefine what power rankings mean, Dave, because you literally ranked them 28th. You ranked them 28th and said you don't expect them to finish 28th.
What is power ranking? Oh, it's just...
It's like, where are they at in the NFL right now, not where are they going to be 2-3 years from now?
Yeah, they're one of the worst teams in the NFL. That's where I've got them. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL.
I disagree with that. I'm going to say why, and then Colton, I want you to be the decider here. And I swear to Joe Bryant that if you say there's valid points on both sides...
No, I had a
booting you from...
I had a question on Kyler Murray.
Let's hear the follow-up. Yeah.
No, I just had a question on Kyler Murray. I've noticed just watching him play, do you think it's like he doesn't... You say that there's like great moments and everything, and I completely agree. My theory is like there's a situational issue there where the moment gets when the moment is the biggest for Kyler Murray, that's usually when you see him not make those plays. Is that what you've noticed too? I just want to see if there's any validity there because that's been my theory.
Yeah, I mean, I know people throw around the term like clutch gene all the time, and I don't want to say that because you see clutch players make bad mistakes in big moments, and you see nobodies make huge moments in clutch spots. So I think that can kind of go either way, but it does seem like that. Like, you know, they're hanging in these close games, and he just can't squeak out the win. And again, like maybe this is an overcorrection for me. Me being a guy for years that said Murray deserved his contract, the guy who has been in on Kyler Murray in fantasy year after year after year. Maybe this is just me overcorrecting because I'm finally kind of out on him. But outside of I'm trying to think what the one game was last year. Was it the game against the Rams? I think that he had that one where he looked like the best quarterback in football, and that was really the
Are you thinking that
only
week
really
2
good game
game?
we saw from Kyler last year. Yeah, yeah, week
Yeah.
2.
Yeah, I was at that game. It was insane. I was like,
Yeah,
this might be the year he does it, and then it just that was it. That was the high point.
yep.
That's what it felt like. And then that Panthers game at the end of the year that like ended their season, and he threw
Hmm.
a pick, and yeah, it's such a mixed bag with him. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I think what we have seen is, especially last year, like just down the stretch, Kyler really struggled. He stopped being an accurate quarterback. He got a little more frantic,
He
and I
stopped
wonder how
rushing.
much of the, yeah, well, yeah, and it's, I wonder how much of that too has been that I don't know if there was an actual reliance on guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. throughout the season, and I mean, it was at that point, right, where they had lost James Conner for the year, or did he come? He came back.
He came back.
I'm
Yeah, I
trying to
think he
remember.
missed like 2 or 3 games if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I don't know what it is then, guys. Kyler Murray just kind of up and down. But I'll say this. As a team, I do see the Arizona Cardinals as a much improved team, especially along the defensive front. I mean, they've added Dalvin Tomlinson, Josh Sweat, Akeem Davis-Gaither. Like, there's actually some good defensive presence on this team that they haven't had for a long time. I think I expect them to go defense as well in the NFL draft. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be sort of the straw that stirs the drink for the Cardinals. Either he takes a big step and becomes a star. I know you're making the face, Dave. Stop making faces. It doesn't work for podcasts. But
Yeah.
he's got to take the step. Like, he has to go out and play as a guy that they drafted as a top pick in the NFL draft. If he can't do that, if he can't go out there and be a Jamar Chase, a Justin Jefferson, one of those guys, then this was all for naught. And that's the thing, is that I think it's actually less about Kyler Murray and more about Marvin Harrison Jr. at this point. Kyler Murray is what he is. Marvin Harrison Jr., the jury's still out. Like, we don't know if he's going to be that player for Kyler Murray.
Did you see anything last year from Marvin Harrison Jr. that made you think that he can be that dominant wide receiver one? Because I mean, there were moments. He had a couple of big games. He had some nice, strong contested catches, but he looked slow last year, man. He looked like he was running in Timberlands out there. Like, he just did not look like a wide receiver one to me.
I don't know what it was, because he wasn't that player at
I
Ohio
know.
State. And it's not like everyone on the field is just subsequently faster when you go to the NFL. I mean, sure, the game speed feels faster because people are more experienced. And I wonder if that's what it is it's just he's getting through the progressions of his route a little bit slower, and he's trying to take his time, because at Ohio State, you've got all this time to run your routes, and in the NFL, you really don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure what it is, but that's why I say I think that he's the X factor for this team, that he is the guy that actually has to take it to the next level. Trey McBride's not enough. James Conner's a little bit older. Kyler, I don't think Kyler gets you over the hump by himself. I think this needs to be a Marvin Harrison Jr. thing. Okay. Final tier here, and honestly, I think we can just pick one team here to talk about each. At 25, New England Patriots. Let's not talk about them because we already talked about them. 26, you know what? We're going to talk about the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, we'll come back to them. 26, Seattle Seahawks. 27, Jacksonville Jaguars. 28, New Orleans Saints. 29, Indianapolis Colts. 30, Cleveland Browns. 31, New York Giants. 32, Tennessee Titans. Congrats on Cam Ward, Titans fans. Dave, let's talk about the Seahawks, because I think they're the most intriguing team out of this bunch, because of all the moves made here. They lose big players, DK Metcalf, but then they bring in Cooper Kupp. Not quite sure where I'm at with him. I really don't like the move all that much. I know you've mentioned that you like it and that Clint Kubiak is going to run a very successful offense that has worked for years and years, but also Clint Kubiak hasn't proven to be a very good offensive coordinator in the NFL. So I kind of want to see where this team is going. I don't necessarily believe that Sam Darnold's going to be able to overcome the poor interior line play. Colton, I want to start with you, actually. Where are you at with the Seattle Seahawks? Because you rated them actually lowest out of all of us. So are you kind of on the bandwagon here that they might be one of the worst teams in the NFL or the worst team?
I just think there's so much uncertainty. I've actually been trying to research this quite a bit and kind of see how all the pieces might fit together and all of those things. I like Sam Darnold as a play action quarterback. I think the running back options here too are effective enough to make defenses respect the running game and open up things in the passing game and all of that. I do, my big variable is or my big uncertainty, I guess, is how does Cooper Kupp and JSN sort of work together in that offense, and maybe maybe Cooper Kupp he's not on the field as much or whatever. I just, that was my big question, is like, how do those two work together? I actually think Noah Fant could see a bit of a bump here in this offense. I think that would be something that might work as well, utilizing Noah Fant and the short to intermediate play action sections of the offense. But I think the running game could be the catalyst here to open everything else up. And if that's the case, then I think JSN and Cooper Kupp on the field together, and whoever's in the slot and who's elsewhere, it could actually work together. So I just think there are so many variables and moving parts, and it's like I don't even know what this is going to look like. So my default was to just move them down a little more because I didn't quite see the same upside that I saw in other places. But that was kind of my thought process on their ranking where it was.
Yeah, and it's I know a lot is made about JSN and Cooper Kupp having overlapping skill sets, but JSN does have the size and speed to play out wide. We saw him do that a lot in college. We saw him take on that role a little bit last year when DK Metcalf was hurt. So I think that moving him out wide, we always talk about this X receiver in a Kubiak or a Shanahan offense, similar to those big crossing deep routes across the middle of the field. That's what JSN should be getting next year. Cooper Kupp, he can contribute in the run game, and I think that's why they got him, because they can stay in 12 or 21 personnel with 2 tight ends or 2 running backs on the field, still stay out there with Cooper Kupp and get that extra blocker coming in to help as well. So I kind of like what they did here, but really they're just set up for success this year as well. They've got 5 picks inside the top 3 rounds. They've got their pick at 18, and then they've got 2 seconds, and they've got 2 thirds. They've done a really good job just squirreling away draft capital so they can address all of these positions of need. And if you look, what they had last year, Geno Smith and DK Metcalf, going from Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp, or going from that to Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp, while also saving a bunch of money and getting immediate draft picks. I think that it's kind of a smart move here. And Alfredo, I do agree. I think that you look at Clint Kubiak, his entire body of work, it's not great, but we saw sparks flying last year at the start of the season with the Saints when they were all healthy. Yeah, and then everybody got hurt. Olave got hurt, and Rashid got hurt, and Juwan Johnson got hurt, and the wheels.
But even
really
prior
fell
to
off.
the injuries, like Derek Carr looked back. So this is my only point of contention here, is that when you end up being so reliant on when you run play action so much and it becomes your bread and butter,
they stop caring about the run.
But the thing is, it's like you just become so reliant on it where, Derek Carr last year was trying to do all these deep shots. I assume this year it's going to be different with Sam Darnold. I almost called him Sam Bradford. Sam Darnold looking for some more short stuff underneath, even though JSN can be actually a very good deep ball receiver. He's a good tracker downfield. I think this is going to end up being something where you're going to see a lot of dump off quick throws to Cooper Kupp and an offense that could get really stagnant, and they're going to have to try to rely on the run a lot to actually sell this play action. And that worries me.
For it.
They do. They have good running backs,
yeah.
But their offensive line is also absolutely horrendous. So like you would have to bring in 3 to 4 new starters on the offensive line. My worry is that we're going to see a repeat of Sam Darnold running for his life in week 11, throwing the ball up to Marquez Valdez-Scantling while Cooper Kupp is on the sideline, and Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet are each getting 8 touches per game. And that's my fear here, is that this is going to eventually become an incompetent team, because it's like that saying that I believe is Mike Tyson has, that everyone has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. And on paper, sure, sounds like a good plan. Clint Kubiak, keep trying to run that same offense you've been trying to run everywhere. And I don't know that it works here. I just don't know that there are enough pieces in place for him to run what I think is going to kind of effectively be a little bit more of like, I don't want to call it a high school offense, but it's going to be a safe offense that fits their personnel. Colton,
Yeah.
how do you feel about your first experience here on the show, going through all 32 teams?
You brought him
Oh,
in for a
man.
heater.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, what's coming? It was awesome. I loved serving as the middle ground. It's a role that just sort of naturally happened for me. And you know what? I enjoyed occupying it, and I enjoyed talking ball with you guys. So I truly all around great experience. That's my review. There you go.
There we go. 5 stars.
We'll go check out last week's episode with Bob Harris and Colton. They were on the hot seat together. Really,
Yes.
really fun stuff. Colton, stoked
Yeah,
to
it
have you
was
on
fun.
staff. It was cool getting to meet you in Vegas at the retreat this year. Hopefully, you'll be around for many, many more.
I hope so, man. It's been a blast so far. Only been a couple months, but been awesome.
Well, everybody, we loved having you with us for a long show, a packed show, a mega show with all 3 of us. As always, we want to thank you for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, for Colton, we'll see you next time. Adios.